Hey, what's going on? It's Doug Cunnington here, and this is the Doug Show. I'm pretty excited about this interview because I'm talking to Craig Hewitt, the founder of Castos, and I've been using that podcast hosting company for a few years. I have a couple shows over there, and I tell all my friends about it because I like the service, and I think it's been pretty impressive to watch Craig grow the company over the years. So, Craig, how are you doing today?
Hey, Doug, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Fantastic. And we're recording this during the holiday season, so I appreciate you taking the time out and everything. So let's just jump into it. I want to hit a couple of the highlights really quick. And you guys recently hit $1 million annual recurring revenue. You have a team of about 16 or so. And for the people that don't know you at all, can you give a little intro on yourself and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Craig Hewitt. I'm the founder of Castos. We're a podcast hosting and analytics platform with a kind of embedded productized service in it. And maybe we can talk about that a bit later. And that's really where I got my start in this like online business world, is with a previous version of the same business that was called Podcast Motor, where we did done for you podcast editing and production. At this point, we're servicing just under 100 customers a month. On that side, and on the hosting side, on the kind of software platform, thousands of customers there, using us to power their podcasts.
And what's your background? Did you have a corporate gig beforehand, or how did you find your way into this area?
Yeah, like totally unrelated. Yeah, I had a corporate gig. I have a sales and marketing background. I was in sales for a couple of different medical device companies, so selling disposable and capital equipment to hospitals.
Got it. And how long did you do that?
That's all I ever did. So 10 years off and on. Yeah.
And then you found yourself in this other area. So what happened to drive you from sales over to entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So like a lot of folks, kind of like had kids and said like, oh, traveling all the time. And at the time I was like, oh, high stress of like the corporate sales gig is not for me. And then I traded that for higher stress of entrepreneurship. But was just traveling a lot and away from my family a lot. And it's like, this sucks. Like, I just don't want to do this. And started listening to a bunch of Pat Flynn and Tropical MBA and Startups for the Rest of Us. And was like, this seems totally doable. And so I started my podcast, which is called Rogue Startups. And I co-host it with a guy named Dave Rodenbaugh, and who's also in Denver. And gosh, we just did 260 episodes of that show last week. And so I started my podcast, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is great, but this is also like a pain, like there's a lot of complexity that goes into this, just a lot of work. And so that's where the Podcast Motor service came from, is I saw the pain and said, I bet, people would pay for this to just not be a pain anymore. And that was kind of how I exited the corporate world. Is I did that nights and weekends for about a year. Was able to save up enough money and kind of gain runway to where I was able to go full time with that. After about a year.
Nice. In what year did you start listening to like Smart Passive Income and TMBA, which those two were my gateways, by the way, as well. And what years were that roughly? And then
2015, I guess.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then when did you start your show? And were you qualified to host such a show at the time that you started, or what did you even talk about?
Yeah. So like, I think this is interesting. I was definitely not qualified, right? But I just wanted to do it. And I think that like, there's this concept of like relative expertise, like you don't have to be the person that's the expert on this thing, but you need to know more than someone else. And so that was kind of my shtick at the beginning, was like talking to other people that were kind of similar to where I was and maybe a couple steps ahead. And I would interview them just to learn and to network, really. And even now, like I consider myself, whatever, kind of midway through my journey of as an entrepreneur and a founder and as a leader. And so definitely am further along than I was, and then maybe some people are, but I have a long way to go to like where a lot of folks that running, big 8-9 figure companies are. And so I think that's important for folks to realize, like, you don't have to be the epitome, ultimate Mac Daddy at anything. You just have to be, a little bit better and further along than someone else to teach them something. And I think that's what a lot of us who podcast want to do is to help and teach.
Exactly. And you just have to be a little bit further along than your audience, and maybe even just a few steps ahead. Like you just read the blog post that you're about to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've definitely done that. So you had this show and you realized that there were some things that you had to do, and that's where the service came out of it. What was it called again?
It's called Podcast Motor.
Okay. And I suspect you got some ideas from like TMBA, like, hey, you're finding a problem that you're experiencing yourself, you scratch your own itch, and then you realize that you have a great system that you could roll out. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at that time, my two kind of friends, like new friends in the kind of online business world, Brian Castle and Justin McGill, were doing the same thing, launching productized services in order to kind of parlay into a product business. And that's what I did. I mean, really, it's just like a WordPress site and a Stripe form and like that and Trello board. And that's it. And that's the cool thing about productized services. Like you can set up an SEO agency or a PPC agency or a content marketing agency in a day, literally. And even now it's like in an hour, you can just do it and start charging money and be profitable and all that kind of stuff. And then you grow your team and the process and stuff like that to remove yourself from the business. And that's where productized services or agencies get pretty cool, I think, is when you're able to just run the business and not be on the fulfillment level at all. That's where they get pretty cool to me.
And I just realized we should define productized service. So what's the difference between a productized service versus an agency model, and delineate as much as we can? There's probably some overlap, I'm sure.
Totally. Yeah. So for me, a productized service is we do this thing for this fixed price on a recurring basis every month. So we're a content marketing agency. We write 2 blog posts a month for you, and they're 1,500 words, and they have images, and we post them to your WordPress site, and we do the keyword research and all that stuff. For me, an agency is an individual or company comes to an agency and says, I have this problem. And the agency says, okay, great. We'll, craft the proposal and all this kind of stuff. And it's just this, they can do anything kind of thing. And then like a freelancer is like a owner operator person doing the work. But in a productized service, typically the way you want to get it is the founder is not doing the work, but the team and the process is doing the work.
Got it. And the big benefit on the productized service is, and I'll let you provide the punchline.
Scalability and profit. Yeah. I mean, you can scale it much beyond what a freelancer or consultant could do.
Perfect. And in those early days, how did it look for you?
Messy. I'm not like a type A organized person. And so we grew despite me a lot. That was just like, we were very fortunate that it was and still is a really great service for the right people. Probably like a lot of folks that listen to this show have, a little more money than time, want a podcast, but don't want to do all the stuff that you have to do when you podcast. And so they come to us for, a couple $100 an episode, and it's all done for them. And so we had a lot of inbound interest and folks referring our service to their friends and stuff like that. And so had to figure out like scaling services and processes and hiring and onboarding folks as we went. And it was a big old mess for a long time, and finally got to the point where we got the right people in like kind of management roles to where they could just figure that stuff out, because it was just headaches every day for a long time.
Yeah, I can imagine as you're trying to figure it out and you had not done that kind of specific work before, I take it. And did you have experience in your corporate days building a team or having a lot of people working for you?
No, not at all like this. No, but we're part of a team and kind of like a team leader, but not like a manager at all. So yeah, it was all very much figuring it out as we went.
Okay. And we'll hit that more coming up in a bit. So let's talk about the transition from productized service over to SaaS. So Castos does a lot more things than just the service. So you can expand a little bit on that as needed, but how did the transition look? And I mean, were you even planning for it or just arose out of doing this work?
Yeah, literally came from one of our customers at Podcast Motor, a guy named Brad Tunard, who runs Delicious Brains, a big WordPress product company. He emailed me one day and said, "Hey, I know you're obviously into podcasting and wanted to get a product. A friend of mine, a guy named Hugh Lashbrook, is selling this WordPress plugin called Seriously Simple Podcasting that does podcast kind of management in WordPress. This might be an interesting thing for you to pick up and kind of build along the side or on top of Podcast Motor or whatever." And that was kind of where Castos came about is we acquired this WordPress plugin that was and still is entirely free, and built the hosting platform to connect to it. So at the beginning, a lot of the Castos customers came from WordPress because that was the only way you could use it. About 8 months after we launched the first version, we opened it up to where you could use it as a standalone platform, like a lot of folks might use, Simplecast or Libsyn or something like that. And at this point, about half our customers are using WordPress with Castos and about half aren't. And so, and that's how Castos got its start, was by us acquiring this free WordPress plugin. And to this day is like a really strong lead gen channel for us.
Brilliant. Yeah, I can't remember how I came across you guys the first time, but I wasn't bullshitting. I've used several different companies and tested them out, and I eventually landed on you guys because of a few different reasons, which it's not a commercial for you guys, by the way, but it worked really well, and I liked the offering in general. So can you share how much you bought the plugin for?
I can't share specifically, but like
Okay.
4 figures. Yeah.
Okay. So nothing crazy. Like people may be thinking you bought this huge acquisition channel, but it was relatively affordable for like a plugin that works and does what it's supposed to do. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you ended up with a plugin, and it was going to be a good lead generator for the service. And when did you start the hosting portion of this?
Right away. Yeah. I mean, right away, the plan was always buy the plugin, build the SaaS to kind of connect to that. And then like I didn't have a plan for what would happen with the service from there. The plan all along was that the service would help us bootstrap the development of the software platform, because I'm not a developer. And so, hire a developer, and they are expensive and take a long time to build things. And I mean, he's wonderful. Our first developer was amazing. But just takes a lot of time and resources. And so nice to be able to do that through bootstrapping with the profits from the service.
Okay. And you're not a technical person. Did you have a hard time, like, even conveying to the developer what you needed? And I have a background in that specifically, so project management for software. So I know the requirements and the testing and like the whole development cycle, but was that challenging for you?
Incredibly. Yeah. Yeah. And really painful for the developer. Like, I think all developers that are listening to this right now just cringe at the non-technical, founder or product person that's trying to, guide them on, what's being built. And it's just hard because like we literally speak a different language, right? Like we literally are not saying the same things when I say, hey, I want this to go connect like that. And they go interpret it and build something, and you come back and say, no, that like steps 2 and 3 are backwards and all this. And so, I mean, went from literally a Google Doc where we would just kind of, wrap on features, to Trello, to, we've tried them all at this point. We use a combination of Notion and GitLab and Product Board to kind of plan out our product stuff. But the evolution of communicating what's in my head to a person who can make that, and there's a lot of nuance in that, is or teams that can make that is still really super challenging.
Where'd you find your first developer that you were working with, or developers?
He was a referral from the guy we bought the plugin from.
that's lucky that person was
Super
able to do
lucky.
it.
Yeah, super lucky. Yeah.
Okay. And then with, I guess, anything else to note about like having a technical founder? We were talking a little bit beforehand. So a lot of the audience that's listening, they do have a technical background. So yeah, I'll ask the question, what do you think about technical founders versus like doing it yourself? And do you have advice for people?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at, programs like Y Combinator, they almost exclusively fund multi-founder companies, two or three, where one is technical and one is not, or both are technical, because it's just so hard for a non-technical person to learn the language of developers, and have a good eye for product, I think. And it's really hard for a developer to know all the sales and marketing and ops stuff that a non-technical person should come to the table with. And so, I mean, I still am a solo founder, and we've raised a little bit of money, which has helped a lot in kind of bridging that gap. But if I had it to do over again or ever do this again, I will 100% have a technical founder, because it's just so important. Both sides are so important. For me, having someone that I can really super trust on the technical side is just vital. So I don't have to think about and worry about, timelines and product and all that kind of stuff, but can do everything else in the business. And for them, they need to have the confidence that, hey, I can focus on product, and someone else can, run the business and make us money and stuff like that. So I think if you get the right complementary pair, it's super important. And early on, Jonathan, our first developer, Jonathan Bossinger, was, I mean, really almost like co-founder level to me, and yeah, without it, like, there's no chance that we would have been able to do what we did, if it was just kind of your run-of-the-mill contractual developer relationship,
Got it. And looking back, I'm curious, do you think you had the network or the ability to pull on or find a tech co-founder? I suspect these days you know a lot more people and you have a much bigger network, so you could probably find the right person. But back then, was it even possible?
Probably, yeah, probably. I mean, like you said, I know a lot more people now, and so it'd be a lot easier, but still quite challenging, I think. A lot of people equate a co-founder to a spouse, and I think that's right. I mean, what I would want out of a co-founder is, yeah, every bit as much as my wife, in terms of support and trust and reliability and everything. And so, I don't like. I think you're getting at, like, how would I do that? I don't know, but I would try very hard to do it. I think that you almost have to have worked with someone. And that's what I see a lot of with multi-time founders, is they're a single founder and maybe hire that really key developer in their first company. That person becomes on to become like CTO or lead developer or whatever, and then they bring them to the next company. I can imagine that being how it might go for me.
And I've been a smaller scope, but I've partnered with people that I was in masterminds with. So I've known them for years, and I've had many hours of conversation with them. And there's that built-in trust that you're talking about, which is probably like one of the biggest things. I mean, people can learn a lot of things and figure out problems, but the trust, you have to really put in the time.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
Very cool. So what podcasts do you listen to these days?
Gosh, so like I haven't I used to listen to a ton, right? Because I was in like field-based sales. So like I was driving 2, 3, 4 hours a day and would just listen to a ton of podcasts. These days, I listen to 3 really regularly. I listen to Startups for the Rest of Us, so Rob Walling. And then I listen to Bootstrap Web, so Brian Castle and Jordan Gall. And then I listen every once in a while to Built to Sell, a guy named John Warrillow. Really, really, really smart guy, written a couple really good books. And then the other one that I just recently started listening to is Invest Like the Best. And I forget the guy that is Colossus. Join Colossus is their site. Yeah, those are the 4 that that I listen to most of the time these days.
You bring up a good point about not commuting. And I used to listen to a lot more shows as well, especially you're doing a job that you don't want to do. So I would actually listen like all day long
Right.
during the commute. But have you noticed, obviously you have a lot of data being a podcast hosting company, has the listening level gone up or down due to COVID and or quarantining and stuff like that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Right at the beginning of the pandemic, it went down a lot in almost all categories. The exceptions to those were like comedy, and in some cases, news. That the consumption went up a lot as folks have gotten back to their normal lives. And I think here around the holidays of 2021, we might be going backwards a bit, but consumption got back up to and listenership got up to kind of pre-pandemic levels. So yeah, definitely a dip through like say March through the summer of last year, really then through the fall and up until this fall, probably pretty normal numbers. And I think just maybe folks listening preferences have changed as all of our lives are just quite a bit different than they were before.
Very good. Well, I want to transition over and talk about your remote team. So the team's fully remote, about 16 people total. I think that's including you. And you mentioned that you didn't necessarily have experience managing or hiring a team. So can you talk about the process of growing? I'm sure it wasn't all at once. And I am interested in sort of the org chart and the like layers of management that you have in place.
Yeah. So, I think the most important thing for me, the most important thing is like, it's all just an evolution, right? It's not like any unit steps of we were this and now we're that. We were, a team of 3 and now we're a team of 8. Like it's every new person that joins changed the dynamic a little bit in the team structure and the org chart and all that. And so I think it's important from a recruiting and hiring perspective to hire people who not just are okay with that, but really thrive in the environment of constant change. That's something that we've learned a lot lately is people who are really good with being challenged and being kind of faced with a lot of uncertainty in their job. And not in a job security way, but just in a, hey, your job might change tomorrow and I'm going to ask you to do something totally different. We've had people who are not okay with that and need a lot of structure. And even now, like we're just not that structured. I mean, we very loosely plan out a quarter of product work at a time. But things like marketing campaigns are week to week. And so we need people who are super nimble there just from a mindset perspective and their tolerance for that. From a management perspective, it's changed a lot and how the team is run and how we communicate and organize and set goals. Most recently, we have adopted the OKR model. I don't know if you're familiar with OKRs, so objectives and key results. So popularized by like some of the big kind of Silicon Valley companies, including Google. It's just a way to, in a really systematic way, set goals for the company on like a company level, and then like division level, so like marketing and sales and product and support and things like that, and give really specific goals for everyone to achieve to kind of lead up to the main corporate objective. There's a lot more kind of to it than that, but as opposed to just, hey, we're a rudderless ship out here and everybody is working towards whatever they think is important, is, me as the founder taking the time and mental energy to say, like, what do I think is the most important thing for the company to be successful in the next 90 days? Write it down, share it with everybody, get their buy-in and input and collaborate on those specific kind of key metrics. And then shut everything else out for the next 90 days. And that's kind of where the magic has happened for us, is us to be able to say, hey, this is it. Everything else, not everything else, but everything else that's like elective that you might want to work on is just not going to happen because it's not part of our OKRs. And it's been a growing experience. I mean, it's not without its learning opportunities, I'll say. But we're just finishing up our first real quarter of it, and it's been really super positive. And we're kind of shaping what the first quarter of next year will look like, and kind of going deeper into OKRs. So yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing that guides how the team focuses. And then from there, like in terms of communication, obviously like Slack and Notion and GitLab and all these kinds of things. And then we try to be relatively asynchronous. Like there's not a ton of kind of chatter going on in Slack every day. But we do have what some folks might think is kind of a lot of calls. Like I have a call at least once a day with different kind of groups in the team. So we have like an all hands meeting on Monday. We have marketing on Tuesday, sales on Wednesday, product on Thursday. And those are nice just because you don't go too long without being able to check in with almost everybody, even if it's in a kind of small group setting. And like as great as Notion and all these tools are, like there's no substitute for a bunch of smart people getting together and working on a problem in real time. And so, yeah, I mean, from a hiring perspective, we do have a strong preference to kind of folks in the Americas time zones or in Europe. Just because, in Europe, they're 5 or 6 hours from the East Coast. I just moved last week I used to live in France, now live on the East Coast in Rhode Island. And so definitely feel both sides of that coin of being, on the early side and now kind of on regular time zones. But yeah, I mean, having someone in Vancouver and then someone in Thailand and then someone in, Montenegro or something would be just like too much. So we don't draw hard lines, but it's a strong preference.
Got it. I want to go back to a couple of things you mentioned there. So it sounded like people's roles can change pretty often. Do you have any specific, I don't want to say horror stories, but any interesting stories where someone's role changed fairly dramatically from like what they thought and either it worked out well or it didn't work out well? And if you don't have one, I have some follow-up questions too, but any interesting stories about the shifting roles that pop up?
I don't have any specifics, but I have kind of just a general way we think about it is like really try to lean into people's strengths as opposed to try to bringing up their weaknesses. And that's worked pretty well for us. So I would just say like, we try pretty hard not to put a square peg in a round hole, but just keep folks aligned with what they're good at and they like. And I think that's a pretty good model.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with the remote team in general, were there any specific challenges with COVID or did that just work out nicely because you have the remote team?
Yeah, it was totally seamless. Yeah. I mean, we were supposed to have a team retreat in Portugal last summer, 2 summers ago, I guess. And that obviously just didn't happen. But yeah, that was about the biggest one.
Okay. And I heard another podcaster ask a question like this. I thought it was good. How do you get feedback to your team when they mess up or you need them to fix something? And basically it's like, how do you give bad news to someone on your team?
Yeah, this is really hard. And I think this is contrary to a lot of our personal styles, right? Is like being passive is probably the best word, and passive aggressive maybe is the reality. Unintentionally, right? Like we just want to be nice people and we don't want to work with jackasses. Sorry. And so like as a result of that, you aren't honest with people. And that's super harmful. So there's a really good book called Radical Candor that talks a lot about this. And like the extreme of it is like you sit someone down to fire them one day and they've never gotten a proper review and they've never gotten feedback. And like, how unfair is that? As opposed to, hey, you did this thing, it wasn't great. Next time, let's do this. Yeah, that's a really kind of light version of it. Or like there's a whole spectrum of kind of more intense direct feedback between that and, you're going to get fired. And honestly, like I've not done perfect at this just because I am a pretty chill person, like I'm just not I really, 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 really want to succeed. But I also know that like a big part of this company is the people that are not me. Right. And so like micromanaging people and having my finger on every decision that's made is just not the kind of company I want to build. And so there's got to be some leeway that folks have to make mistakes and that kind of stuff. And so we typically tend towards like retros, to give that feedback and pull those learnings out. And I have a call every other week with most everyone on the team, and that's the kind of safe space where it's just one-on-one. Anything that they want to say to me, anything I want to say to them happens then. And the goal is that there's not this kind of crescendo buildup of an annual review of you suck and you're going to get, on the performance improvement planner, but just like, hey, this thing happened last week. Like, let's not do that again. And that's the goal. How well we do, honestly, I don't know, but that's the goal.
I think those one-on-one meetings are really important. When I had back in the corporate days, I had a fairly sizable team, and I made it a point to meet with everyone because it's really easy to just think someone's doing fine over on their island, and then all of a sudden it blows up, or vice versa. And a lot of times if things are going fine, you can just shoot the shit and just have a conversation, which is, I think pretty valuable. It's easy to push back, especially now since I haven't had a corporate job in a long time, to think like, oh yeah, meetings are fine, like no big deal. Like it's useful to have the one-on-one interaction, but sitting where I am now in my like golden studio palace, it's easy for me to say, but yeah, I think it's not a waste of time to do one-on-one meetings. Any advice for people that might think that? I mean, it sounds like you're making an effort at least every 2 weeks to chat with everyone.
Yeah, a lot of the times it is just shooting the shit. And a lot of times it is, hey, this thing was mentioned, or this thing that's happening, I'm unclear about, or I'm not cool with, or, whatever. It is the time where like performance improvements are discussed. Just because like, I don't want to have like this big, huge annual review process. I have a lot of friends that do annual reviews. And to me, like that's just bottling it up too much to where if I have to wait 6 or 8 or 10 months to talk to somebody about something, then there's almost no hope that it'll be recoverable. So that's what I say is these micro adjustments are a lot easier than this one big whole thing. But also like management style is like a style, right? And it's taking OKRs or the EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System, and rocks and all these kind of things and making it your own. We've fucking done it all, I feel like at this point, and are just finding the flavor of these things that work for us,
Perfect. And you can kind of pick and choose and keep the ones from the different systems that gel with the team. Perfect.
Yeah, totally.
How many hours do you work a week now? And I'm curious how it's shifted over the trajectory of the company.
I work about 30, 35 hours a week right now. And if it's all going right, it's all working on the business and not in the business, right? To the E-Myth kind of paradigm. And we're pretty close with a team of like 15 other than me. Like everyone is responsible for kind of something for each kind of part of the business. There was a time I was working really hard when we were just smaller, and I was doing support and marketing and sales and product. And that's just like, I could never do that again, but I was probably working 50 or 60 hours a week then. And that's just, it's just super hard. And like I mentioned, we raised like just under $1 million in funding. And it's really nice to be able to put that to hiring really talented people to take care of parts of the business that I'm not good at or don't like. And that's kind of where I try to allocate those funds.
And then what's the ideal work week for you, I guess, like in terms of numbers of hours? Just curious about that.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with where I am.
Okay.
Yeah, 30 hours, pretty good.
Not too bad. And I was going to say, I remember in the earlier days, you did answer a couple of my support tickets. And then recently, I'm not a squeaky wheel. I don't want you to think that, Craig, but you actually answered an email that I sent from the support team as well. And you answered that. So you're in the weeds a little bit. Give you credit for that.
Yep.
All right. So let's talk about podcast analytics. I warned you that I was going to grill you on this. And I've complained a bunch, and I complain about people, unfortunately, just like you, Craig, who will say, yeah, we got great analytics over here at this podcast hosting company, but it's really hard to get accurate information. I could kind of get the number of downloads, but that's about it. So what is actually important? What should I care about? What would be nice to have? And I'll give you a chance to explain yourself and tell me why it's so hard as a hosting company to give us this information.
Yeah, it's super hard, right? I mean, it's something that will literally never be done from our end because it changes a lot. Like the interaction of bots and crawlers and all these kind of artificial forms of traffic change a lot. And kind of how that impacts the kind of raw data. And then kind of like how much data we have and how we display it to folks is the other kind of question there. I think the reason that podcast analytics suck is that once a file leaves our platform, we don't have any visibility to it anymore. So if you compare it to, say, Google Analytics or YouTube or something like that, that's an entirely kind of enclosed ecosystem or loop where like they know when play was pressed and how long somebody watched your video on YouTube and stuff like that. Once a file leaves our system and you're using Overcast or Apple Podcasts on your phone, like we don't see that file anymore, and there's no ping back, and all of the podcasting app providers, I think rightfully so, are very privacy focused where they don't want to send that information to us. And so I think that's why, Bob downloaded episode 37 on Thursday and listened for 12 minutes is never going to happen in a conventional public podcasting realm. We do get all of that information with our mobile app in private podcasting. So I don't know if folks are kind of familiar with private podcasting as opposed to public podcasting like this, where it's out and it's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and anyone can listen. Private podcasting is kind of by invite only. It's like a membership site in podcast format. And we have a mobile app, iOS and Android, where folks can listen and you can go in and download or stream the file. And then we report, okay, Bob listened to episode 37 on December 25th for 12 minutes because we control the playback environment there. But until you do, or if other providers are, they're not going to be able to give that kind of level of data.
Perfect.
Which is what folks want, I know.
And that was mostly in jest. I understand the limitations and exactly what you described. Yeah. So,
and just one more, one more thing, like for the podcasting kind of ecosystem this is why Spotify has gotten so popular is they're a closed system, right? They are YouTube of podcasting, right? To where they're the platform, they're the advertisers, or they have the relationship with advertisers and they control the playback environment. And so they have the whole stack, and you've seen some acquisitions in the podcasting, like kind of industry of like advertiser platform, like Castos, and mobile app in the past. And like those aligning is super powerful. And I can see that more of that will continue to happen if the ad model is the model that will continue to monetize the industry, which I don't know that it will be, but yeah.
Okay. Actually, and I want you to keep going on that, like if advertising will be the model, but just want to make sure I understand from a podcaster's point of view, like what metrics should I care about? Or downloads enough? Like, is that enough for me to understand what's going on? Or should I be more curious about deeper analytics?
Yeah. I mean, for most all podcasters, that's enough, right? Like, on a per episode basis is the number going kind of up and to the right, so you release an episode on Tuesday and you see this big spike and there's a kind of a long tail after that. Is that number going up every episode you release or every month or something like that? If the answer is yes, like you're doing the 80-20, of what you need for a podcast.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. And then let's jump back on the monetization situation. So advertising is sort of the primary situation now. So yeah, where do you see it going? It sounds like you had a little doubt with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we try to be a little contrarian there because we are putting all of our eggs in the private podcasting basket when it comes to the future of the platform and monetization. Is nobody wants to hear another fucking advertisement for Casper mattresses. It's just not relevant for almost all shows and audiences. Whereas the ability to control your audience exposure to your content, like control that experience, to charge money directly for access to your content, or to tie it into your membership site or your course or your online store, or e-commerce or whatever, is just so much more of a natural extension of like how we are normally, right? Is like, I do this thing and it's great. And then I have these friends that I have over for dinner and we talk about this thing, right? And like, it's the same idea. It's like my life is my life. And then I have this other circle that I do special things with. And we think that we're kind of doing the same thing in the podcast format. The other thing is it's just really hard to make a decent amount of money with ads in podcasting, right? So podcasting typically runs on a CPM, so cost per 1,000 downloads. And that CPM for a really good show is $25 or $30. So if you have 1,000 downloads for an episode in the first 6 weeks, you make 25 or $30. Platform wide for us, very few shows do that, right? Like maybe 5%. And so the ability for any podcaster to make any amount of money, any appreciable amount of money is just like, it's ridiculously low. Whereas if you have 1,000 people listening to your show, to get 50 of them to pay you $10 a month is like, that's pretty realistic. And we see a ton of people coming into us and saying, hey, I have this membership site over here, or this community, or this course where I have a bunch of people coming in and interacting with me. I want to extend how I connect with them to podcast format. And I'm going to repurpose my weekly Zoom meetings with this group as a podcast and offer it to those members if they aren't able to make the call. And so they're able to do that. And we have all sorts of automations and direct integrations with a lot of providers that folks are using to power the rest of their kind of online business. And that's where we see the future.
And do you have any specific, I guess, case studies or examples where someone has done this pretty successfully that you could talk about here?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we have, without kind of naming names, just because I haven't gotten sign off from folks, but like
Sure.
A bunch of, quite a few folks in, I don't even know what's the word, but like urban myths or urban legends kind of podcasts, Bigfoot and things like this. Folks just love hearing about it, right? And so a lot of our customers have a public podcast where they release, regular 4 episodes a week or a month, and then we'll have an extra bonus episode that's only for members. And so they have a membership site. Maybe it's on, Squarespace, and they use MemberSpace to power their membership site, and then they connect MemberSpace to Castos directly through an integration where when a new person signs up and pays their $10 a month, that person gets added as a private podcast subscriber in Castos and gets the bonus episode every month. Same for courses, same for weight loss, same for coaches and consultants who already connect with people in a way and want to repurpose or extend that relationship with their members or students or audience in podcast format.
Got it.
Yep.
So changing gears a little bit here, there are podcasting is growing. I'm starting another show myself and doing more and more. I love the format and everything. And there's a lot more bigger companies that are producing, this really highly produced, high quality shows. Basically they're the radio shows from back in the day that the people are just moving over to podcasts. So what impact do you see that having on smaller shows like mine that are more, we'll just say lo-fi and low production value?
It's making it more difficult, right? Like I'd be lying if I didn't say that. I think that a lot of shows like this and like mine are needing to kind of level up our games to stay competitive and relevant for our listeners, because they can go listen to NPR like shows that are produced by indie creators, but are really, really, really good. And so that just makes it challenging for us. At the same time, there's always an interest and alignment for really niche targeted audiences and content and shows. So I think that's the most important thing, is just two bearded white guys talking about, sports or whatever, or online business is not going to make it these days. But if they get really specific and really targeted and align their kind of content and audience and messaging, they can 100% still be successful with I'll say, basic kind of show setup.
And with YouTube, and I have another show, I actually publish every episode over on YouTube as well. So how do you see podcasting and YouTube fitting together and, helping to grow a show?
Yeah, I mean, we believe pretty strongly that like your podcast should be on YouTube. Whether you record native video content like we're recording today, video content, and I'm guessing you'll publish this to YouTube, or for my podcast and for our podcast at Castos called Audience, we don't record video, but have a service within the platform that converts it to an audio episode to video format automatically and publishes it to YouTube. So you're getting a video presence for your podcast on YouTube without doing the video work. So I think either way you slice it, whether you record a Zoom call or whatever in video and you put it on YouTube, that's cool, or don't and use a service like ours to just automatically convert it for you is the way to go.
Okay. And any best practices to get the best reach over on YouTube, or the cross-pollination that would work best?
I don't have any like silver bullets there. I mean, I think it's a lot of the typical like best SEO practices, titling and show notes or descriptions and links and things like that, just to make sure that all of that is there. Having a thumbnail image is really important on YouTube, so folks know just by looking at the image what they're getting into. I think those are some of the best practices.
Okay, cool. Well, as we're wrapping up here, anything else that I forgot to ask you that you want to mention here before we tell people where they can find you?
No, I mean, this is a ton of fun. Thanks for chatting through all this.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's been a blast. I'm glad we were able to connect here. So yeah, where can people find you? And you can mention your podcast and other shows over there on Castos as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So castos.com, castos.com. Folks want to kind of check out what we're doing there. We have an academy, so a bunch of free resource. Anybody who's kind of looking to get into podcasting, there's hours and hours of kind of video tutorials and stuff there. So academy.castos.com if you want to check it out. Our podcast is called Audience, and we publish it every Thursday. It's really great if you're kind of looking to level up your podcast game.
Awesome. Thanks, Craig. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Doug.